Entry complete. Like, comment, subscribe. The archive remembers.
Gentlemen, I've got an old pair of headphones, some Soviet ones, I think. They used to belong to my brother, later got resoldered for a normal jack. Picks? Maybe later. Pick kinda related, except they're red, not blue. I was reinstalling that disgraceful Windows, and the headphones were plugged straight into the computer. The sound card drivers weren't installed yet. I was still hunting them down online, and I had the headphones on my head purely out of habit. At first I thought it was just interference, but then I started making out voices, like actual voices. They're saying something, but I can't understand what exactly. I can't even tell if they're male, female, or whatever else there is. Every now and then there's a faint squeal in the headphones, and the funniest part is that even if you listen with just one ear, it shows up in both, somewhere in the middle of your head. When the squeal appears, the voices disappear for about a minute, and instead there's a quiet creaking and hissing. Totally normal, earthly sounds, and then at some point, the voices come back again. I've been sitting here for an hour now, trying to make them out. There is an ATC nearby with an antenna, though who the hell knows what's really there? A strategic facility, surrounded by a 3-meter fence, and there's also a military unit close by, radios and all that, and in general it's almost the city center, not some middle-of-nowhere forest. Though it is a private housing sector, so in a worst-case scenario you can explain it away. But the voices are clearly audible. Here's what caught my attention. I only hear the voices when I plug the headphones directly into my sound card, and it only works if the drivers were never installed in the first place. If I install them and then remove them, nothing. But otherwise, it's a completely repeatable experiment. I'll try to decipher it. And my hearing is actually pretty good. I'm not 15 anymore, not even 20. But I was a failed piano student, then a self-taught one, in a way. Still, I always thought that ultrasound is called ultrasound, precisely because it's inaccessible to the human ear. By the way, this sounds much more like radio communications than security guards swearing into walkie-talkies. Also, can anyone tell me why an ATC would need an antenna? And is it dangerous for your health that it's only about 40 meters from my house? I listened almost the entire night yesterday, some kind of nonsense. No ads, no Malokhoff, never heard anything like that. At first I thought it was radio chatter, but sometimes the replies don't match up, at least it feels that way, and they're short, clipped phrases. Some kind of mine keeps getting mentioned. There have never been any mines in our city, ever.
Moving toward the mine. Feel the mine. They're going down into the mine.
I can't tell who's speaking and who's replying, but between the voices there's a sound like TV static. Sometimes it's just random words, and sometimes things like,
Power is on. Mark.
and very often
3 bodies at.
followed by letters and numbers. Then more short phrases, half of them impossible to make out. It doesn't sound like they're talking about corpses. More like bodies in the sense of spherical bodies in a vacuum, like objects. But again, who the hell knows? I don't understand shit. That squeal is incredibly irritating. By morning, my teeth were aching. It constantly throws me off. It doesn't repeat at regular intervals. It just happens suddenly and stupidly. I don't even have time to take the headphones off. Right before the squeal, there's some kind of sound signal, almost like speech, but very short and chopped up, yet always the same. I'll be listening again tonight, and the strangest part is that at night, and during the day, as far as I can tell, I'm at work during the day, but I ran home a couple of times at lunch. The level of activity in the transmissions is the same. Yesterday I called over a buddy, a regular drinking companion, and we listened together, mostly laughed our asses off. But while we were still not completely under the influence, we managed to make out about a dozen phrases. This was the first night. Well, maybe not the whole night. We weren't exactly focused on just this, as there were no messages about bodies and numbers. The mystical vibe kind of faded. I honestly thought from the start it might be something like the voices of the dead phenomenon, LOL. The messages were more like this, repeated in various forms.
Opening. Lifting the next one. The truck is moving.
And one long, very clear one.
6 people to unload the lift.
So yeah, pretty ordinary radio chatter. Something is being transported. By the way, 9522. Yeah, fucked up. Yes, there are some mines around the city, mostly closed, but there are very few of them, and almost no settlements nearby. This isn't a mining or industrial region. Inside the city, like everywhere else, there are drainage tunnels. And in the nearby park, there are some earth caves. That's it. And the most interesting line from tonight, yelled with a ton of swearing boiled down to,
"Tell those morons to leave them the fuck alone."
"Mines or no mines, I've lived here a long time. The house was my grandmother's. Thank God it's been brought back into decent shape. And at night during the day, heavy trucks are supposedly banned. Semis really do sometimes drive out from the ATS compound. So here's the cunning plan. Tomorrow night, my buddy will stand across the entrance to the ATS with his phone, and I'll stay home listening through the headphones. We'll see whether something gets hauled out of there, and whether the radio chatter lines up with it in time. I'm only interested because it's right next to my house. If this really is some miners talking somewhere outside the city and my headphones are somehow picking it up, fuck it. I'm not going to dig into who, what, where, even though, yeah, it's interesting what those bodies are. And I'm also sick of not being able to watch a movie or listen to music on my PC anymore. I asked a friend to bring over a laptop. We'll install my Windows on it and plug the headphones in, see if it picks anything up there or not. Anyway, I'll post again tomorrow. You know, I don't really believe in government conspiracies. Transporting some poison shit? Yeah, they could do that. Installing antennas that might be bad for your health? Also yes. We'll see. Oh yeah, I've trained myself to react to the sound cue that comes right before the squeal. I managed to rip the headphones off in time now, so today my head hurts only from firewater. And only from that, lol. This is some outright bullshit, gentlemen. I was gonna post an update on the 12th, but it's already the 14th. The thing is, I got knocked flat by some kind of illness. Funny as it sounds, I'm starting to believe a few Anons who talked about a cleansing signal, although it could still just be a coincidence. More on that later. Anyway, from Saturday to Sunday, my acquaintance really did stand near the entrance to the ATS with his phone. The commands I was hearing at the time matched the gates opening 8 times during the night, so it's hardly a coincidence. I then asked him to walk over to the nearby military unit, and once again, I hit the mark. The pattern looks like this. Covered trucks marked with the letter L and semis leave the military unit together, drive to the ATS, sit there for a while, and about 40 minutes later leave again, heading toward the ring road. My acquaintance flat out refused to hang around there all night, and spent a long time yelling at me over the phone. At first he was curious too, but I convinced him to go back to the ATS one more time, to make sure it really was the same vehicles leaving, and maybe even see what was inside, though that was unlikely. After that, he'd come back to my place and we'd raise a glass in honor of his heroic feat. And so, while he was standing across from the gates for the second time, 2 guys in civilian clothes walked up to him. They flashed their IDs and asked what he was doing there. He immediately made up some nonsense about a chick, calling her a girl doesn't really match my acquaintance's mug. He was supposed to meet, but she didn't show up, blah blah. And now he's all nervous calling her on the phone, but she's not answering. The 2 men nodded sympathetically, and one of them even offered to call his chick from his own phone. That's where my acquaintance screwed up. He started mumbling something incoherent, then just said, "Alright, I'll be going," and left. When he glanced back, those 2 were still standing there watching him walk away. Bottom line, he said he's not going there at night anymore. So now all hope rests on me. Anyway, we spent the rest of the night drinking and went to sleep. Sunday afternoon was very fun, so I never posted the results. I did listen to the transmissions again that night, and heard pretty much the most interesting thing I've heard so far, but that'll be at the very end. On Sunday evening, I didn't drink. On Monday, like a normal person, I was getting ready for work. I woke up around 7:30, got up, and my head started spinning. That happens sometimes after sleep, so I didn't pay much attention. I also ignored a faint noise in my head. We had been drinking all weekend. I went to the bathroom, but the dizziness didn't go away. On the contrary. When I reached the mirror, I didn't see myself in it. Blood rushed to my head. At least that's what it felt like. So hard that I almost went blind. I made my way back to the bed by touch and lay down, and that's when I realized the noise in my head, which I'd initially ignored, had turned into a constant, even hum. If anyone's ever listened to those audio drugs, it was very similar, a kind of hissing and a low, quiet howl. My temperature went up to 39.1 degrees C. By 11, I'd called work and a doctor. She came after lunch, listened to my breathing, checked my throat, asked if my stomach hurt, if my heart hurt, if it hurt when I pissed. I said no to everything. Then she muttered something about age, gave me a shot, wrote out some meds, and left. That was it. I spent the whole day lying in bed, having these absolutely fucked up dreams and nightmares, worse than anything I'd had since childhood. So bad that I'm even mentioning them here. Looks like whatever potion that witch injected me with was some strong shit. That's basically it. This morning I'm feeling better, even went to the pharmacy. I'm not going to listen to the headphones for now. Let me recover first. With this kind of setup, you start believing in global conspiracies and tinfoil hats. Maybe I'll find someone else to listen instead of me. Just not right now. But here are a few phrases I managed to catch on Sunday evening, besides the usual stuff I mentioned earlier. The last one especially caught my attention.
Take him to the infirmary, quickly, blah.
Then some numbers and letters followed by
Cave in there. 2 bodies.
Then there was a wild scream. Almost couldn't make anything out.
They're refusing! Tribunal! I'll shoot them on the spot myself!
And right before morning,
Don't touch that shit on the walls! The fucking eggheads are already hysterical!
that's it. It's because of that last phrase that I don't want to drop this. All day yesterday, whenever I was conscious, I kept thinking about what the hell could be down there, and there's no doubt anymore that it's underground and almost right under my house. What I'll do next, I don't know yet. I still feel like shit. We'll see. 9542? I don't know. I really don't know anymore. The city's a large regional center. If things go completely to hell, I'll post the exact addresses of all the places I mentioned. For now, no. I've mostly recovered by now. I really want to listen with headphones again, but I'm kind of a pussy about it. Feels like I'm missing the most interesting part right now. Talked a buddy into listening instead of me, at least for a while. By the way, on the laptop they brought me, the headphone trick doesn't work. Whatever. I've come up with a new cunning plan after our little recon outing. So we walked all the way around the telephone exchange and at the same time gave sick me some exercise. 3 sides were no problem, just a road. But on the 4th side there's a dump, on the site of several abandoned lots. The neighbors throw their trash there, and sometimes the exchange dumps some kind of telecom junk too, stripped of precious metals, obviously. And while drunk, we decided to circle the exchange from that side as well. But you can't just walk in there. The entire front of the dump, like I said, is packed with household garbage from the well-off neighbors. Then we remembered childhood, summer games of cops and robbers, back when I used to visit my grandma here. Childhood didn't forget us and answered the call. If you climb over the fence in the backyard of a Khrushchevka that borders the private housing sector, you can crawl through a bunch of filthy backyards and come out right next to the dump, but from the side. I haven't laughed that hard in 100 years. How we crawled through piles of trash and backyard labyrinths, swearing, joking, cracking dumb jokes, that shit deserves to be written into legend. And it turns out, we didn't crawl for nothing. We found a hole. I'm attaching a rough map of the layout of the exchange buildings. The thing is, all around the exchange, like I already said, there's a pretty solid 3-meter fence, plus barbed wire. But this is Russia. Zadornov was right about some things. The fence behind the dump is tall and has wire too, but a big section of it hasn't been repaired or replaced since Soviet times. And there it is, the hole. There are 4 stone blocks at the bottom, mesh above them, wire above that. One of the stone blocks slipped out on the left side from the groove in the post where it was held and fell to the ground. Behind the hole there's an open storage area with walls made of metal mesh. Inside are some kind of telecom junk, probably trash, plastic things that used to have conductors inside. There are a fuck ton of them. We pulled a couple out between the mesh. We were drunk. They're like bows, for fuck's sake. You can shoot stuff with them. So we did. Shot a bit. If you crawl in between the fence and the storage area, you can get to a spot where there's a gap between the junk. From there you can probably see the backyard. So yeah, the idea is to quietly crawl in there at night when they start hauling stuff out again and see what exactly they're hauling out. That's the plan. When I fully recover, we'll probably try it. A satellite photo is attached. Most likely this is the last time I'm writing here, and only because I'm not used to leaving things unfinished. In the near future, I'll try to sell the plot and move away, if not to another city, then at least beyond the outskirts of this one. We planned the outing I wrote about earlier for the night from Saturday to Sunday. On Thursday, everything was still fine. After posting the previous message, I handed my computer over to my friend, who immediately got glued to the headphones, just like I was at the beginning. That evening, he sat at my place, not letting me anywhere near the machine. I, having nothing better to do, just watched the zombie box and then went to sleep. Even though I was staying home and didn't need to go to work, I was very tired. I still hadn't fully recovered from the illness that knocked me flat so suddenly. I woke up around 11 in the morning. I don't know when my acquaintance left. He actually did have to go to work, but judging by the wrappers and the number of empty beer bottles, he sat there almost all night. He didn't leave me any notes. I spent the whole Friday surfing the internet, reading a book, basically enjoying the life of a sick man. The only thing that surprised me was closer to 8 in the evening, when my friend didn't come to take his post, to listen with the headphones. I called his home, and his wife delighted me with the cheerful news. My acquaintance had gone down sick, with a high fever. The doctor suspected tonsillitis, but his throat wasn't even red, nothing hurt, only his head was spinning. At that point, I could no longer consider my illness a coincidence. The symptoms were too familiar. Just in case, I unplugged the headphones from the computer altogether. So it turned out that I would either have to crawl to the exchange alone or postpone the whole thing. I spent the rest of Friday evening and all of Saturday thinking about that. That's when one thing really started to bother me. Okay, let's assume this isn't a coincidence, and my friend and I both became victims, as ridiculous as it sounds, of headphones that pick up military radio traffic and other crap. Maybe something reflected somewhere off the exchange antenna, fine. But what is that sound exactly? And is it even about the sound? I googled a bit, found basically nothing, and gave up. But later this thought came back. And how? Anyway, I decided to go alone. On Saturday night, I had to put the headphones back on, even though on an almost physiological level, it disgusted me to listen to any sounds coming out of them. I immediately realized that something was off on their end. The messages weren't smooth like usual, but garbled. You could hear short, fragmented commands, someone arguing in the background, and above all, top-shelf profanity. But all of that was bullshit compared to what the sound itself was like today. At one point, it felt like blood was running out of my ears. And the main thing was that if at first I only heard something indistinct before the squeal, now that something stretched across the entire length of the signal, it sounded like a bird's scream. Still, I managed to pick commands out of that hellish mess, about opening the gates and sending out a truck. They were driving again that night. I knocked back a parting shot of vodka, got dressed in comfortable clothes I wouldn't mind throwing away, beat up sneakers, a stupid cap with a visor, and went outside. It was like I'd been cursed. On the way there, I kept stumbling, catching on things. On an empty street, I somehow managed to bump into a passerby, and the pack of dogs that had lived here quietly and peacefully for ages suddenly started barking at me and almost tore into me. I swear to you, they were howling at the moon that night. I felt calmer once I climbed over the fence and went deeper into the backyards. At first I got a bit lost, but eventually I made it to the dump. I stood by the hole for a while, just listening. From here you could already hear the soldiers' voices, clipped commands that are impossible to make out if you've never served in the army. The tension apparently was serious. I carefully squeezed through the hole. A teenager would have fit there just fine, but it was tight for me. Trying not to snag myself on the junk or get tangled in the wire, I crawled to the right, toward a gap in the trash where, by my estimate, you could see the rear courtyard. I had to crawl almost all the way to the end. It turned out the center of the yard was occupied by a structure that wasn't visible from outside. A solid Soviet-era brick building with 2 drive-through entrances. I arrived just in time for the most interesting part. What I saw was this. A semi-truck apparently hadn't managed to pull up to the building yet. Soldiers were standing in its way, blocking the road. Some civilians were trying to argue with them, and another civilian was disputing something with one of the officers. An old man was dragged out of the building by his arms. He tried to fight back and was shouting something, but in the general noise I couldn't hear a thing. That night, I probably could have walked straight in through the main gate and no one would have said a word. Everyone was too busy. A dozen soldiers ran into the building. At that moment, I looked away. I was terrified they'd catch me. I tried to look over the territory of the exchange. It constantly felt like someone was watching me or creeping up from behind. And that was exactly when I heard the sound, and after that, everything took an unexpectedly rapid turn. I jumped from fright because, yes, the sound really did resemble that bird scream I'd heard in the headphones before leaving home. Meaning it didn't sound like a seagull or some movie pterodactyl. It sounded more like a sequence of speech-like sounds, but with a bird's shriek, a whistle. I don't know how else to describe it. I made noise, but no one even looked in my direction. An officer was waving his arms, apparently signaling the soldiers inside the building, shouting something. The truck driver jumped out of the cab. One of the civilians was also shouting, either at the officer or at everyone else. I saw a soldier backing away, dragging something while looking around wildly. Soon another appeared, then another, on some ridiculous wheeled contraption, a platform. They were hauling something shapeless, large, wrapped in a tarp, out of the building. The officer was practically driving the soldiers with kicks, while the civilian darted around trying to grab the platform himself so it would roll out faster. Suddenly the old man, the one the soldiers had dragged away earlier, appeared again. He looked completely insane. Jumping onto the platform, with a speed any teenager would envy, he ran back inside the building. And then the sound rang out for the second time. Almost simultaneously, one of the soldiers standing on the guard post, shining a huge, powerful flashlight that looked more like a searchlight, dropped it downward. Everyone else jerked. Total chaos broke out. The soldiers with the platform bolted forward in the flickering light, slammed the platform into a wall. The officer and another soldier were closing the massive metal doors of the building. Someone was screaming something. Everyone was running around like lunatics. A wooden ladder that had been propped against the building fell over. When the lighting was more or less restored, I saw the civilians shouting at the officer again, and he was shouting back so loudly he drowned out all three of them. That's when I noticed the platform. What was standing on it had tipped over. In one place the tarp had slipped, and under it I saw a green mass. I can't vouch for my eyes, but in the light of the searchlights and the moon, it looked like a huge stone block of pale green color. Something was dripping down it. There were some kind of patterns on it, or maybe I imagined that. I didn't know what that shit was, and I didn't want to know. I'd seen enough and headed home, not through the yards, but straight across the garbage hills of the dump. Somehow I made it back. I slammed almost a full glass of vodka in one go and collapsed onto the bed. Even despite my usual squeamishness, I fell asleep right in what I was wearing. I don't know what that sound was, or what was happening there. It still feels like some kind of dream. Though alcohol may have played its part, but I remember everything pretty clearly. I will never put those headphones on again, and I won't let anyone else use them either. They're wrapped in plastic like Laura Palmer and buried in my backyard. And to hell with all these mysteries. Piglet Piotr is getting the fuck out. I am the voice of Jack saying, enough. The last thing I want to add is about my friend. I hope he'll be okay. They took him to the hospital. His fever didn't go down, on the contrary. It got worse. Delirium. His wife cursed me up one side and down the other, saying we'd drunk ourselves into seeing devils. Into full-blown delirium tremens. That morning I was completely numb, just nodding and listening. And what I heard, I immediately recognized where it was from. The moment she mentioned what my friend had been saying. She yelled at me for a long time, crying, raging, and finally, reluctantly said that my friend had asked her to give me some papers. Then she shoved them into my hands and kicked me out of the apartment. Now I'm sitting here, staring at the letters written in my friend's handwriting. Notes from Thursday night. What he managed to pick out from the intercepted communications. Today the horseman of Vendikt Yerofeyev's personal apocalypse stabbed me in the throat with an awl twice. The second time was when I saw this in the military transcripts my friend left me. The farther in they go, they say. Can't hear anything. Cut a tunnel to, followed by digits and letters. A body at, again, digits and letters. It's just enormous. Real labyrinths. Interference. Some kind of fucking ultrasound. Murals. They found murals. Lower the doctor. This can't be lifted. My head is splitting. Interference. There were more notes, commands, bits of conversation, and between them, my friend's comments. I hear this during the beep and before it. It's definitely some kind of word, sounds like a bird's cry, and so on. Different letter combinations he used trying to write down that sound. The first time it hit me, when everything clicked, was when I heard it from my friend's wife while she was screaming at me about her husband. What he was repeating, it was exactly what I'd heard near the exchange and in the headphones. I just couldn't make out the sounds before, couldn't understand why it felt so familiar. And then I remembered. You can consider me insane, but I swear that some of you will recognize this sound too. Hell, people knew about it over 100 years ago. Maybe it's just associations from something I once read. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe I've completely lost my mind, me and my friend both. But this is what his wife told me about what was happening to him on the night from Saturday to Sunday, while I was going to the exchange. He was screaming all evening, all night long, screaming like a madman, screeching, repeating the same thing, then laughing, crying, then starting again. Security, 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 security,